Well, hello there. Good evening, gentlies and ladymen. Lovely to see you. Going to be reading to you. I'm Tad, still, for my sins. And here we are. And anything else I wanted to share with all of you guys? Those of you who heard me last night, of which there may be a couple of you out there, in this daytime performance, I guess, for lack of a better word, will remember hearing me say essentially that I was back to work on Navigator's Children because I had finished the long and complicated path of preparing Into the Narrow Dark for publication. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I explained this last night. I'll try not to be quite so long this time. It's interesting because, of course, I had about a year and a half off of the second half of Navigator's Children because, first of all, everything got slowed up because of COVID. I decided because of that I might as well work on Brothers of the Wind, which was originally going to be published after the last of the large books. And then I decided, well, no, there's a number of reasons why it would work pretty well published before the last of the books. And as it turns out, right in the middle of the large book series. So that's what I worked on then. And then, of course, I was redoing Into the Narrow Dark, which had been the first half of the Navigator book. And of course, made a lot of changes as I went and had this is a long time, and a brain with lots of little things going buzz, buzz, buzz. So I made a lot of changes as I went in terms of ways that I thought I could make the ending work better, or that I came up with what felt like more satisfying resolutions to certain character arcs and stuff like that. So as a result, now I have this, it's not a literal pile, of course, because I'm now almost entirely digital, but it's this virtual pile of manuscript, which is the second half of the original single book, but still many hundreds of pages. And I am now trying to both interleave all the changes I wanted to make, reorder certain things because it wasn't originally planned to be a volume standing by itself. So it it was literally, it starts as the middle of another book. So I have to adjust it slightly to make things work better, just in terms of pacing and what people expect out of a book. And of course, as mentioned, all these other changes that came up and things that I now want to emphasize that if I'd been writing this 2 years ago, would have been written differently. And as I also mentioned, I had a similar gap in the middle of writing to Green Angel Tower. That other aborted third volume, although we did manage to get that volume out in hardcover as a single volume, but that is no longer possible in today's publishing economy. So I've got all these things that I have to now push back together and change into something. And in some ways, I mean, I almost wish I was just sitting down to write 600 or 700 pages from scratch. Because it's much easier to integrate things as you're writing them than by going back and trying to stick them into things you've already written. And it's a big mess. It's a mishigas. But I'm not complaining because it means that I'm going to be finishing up now finally the story that I've been working on since like 2013, 2014, which is very exciting for me. Because one of the most frustrating things about writing these long stories is that you're always a year and a half, 2 years ahead of where the readership is. So, for me, the things that are coming out now, like Into the Narrow Dark is coming out. And when it comes out in the summertime, I hope that the readers will be excited and like, oh, wow, this happened. And oh my God, I never saw that coming. Or geez, I totally was hoping that would happen. Or whatever reactions that people have that a writer wants people to have, wants his or her readers to have. But at the same time, I will be that is going to be that's as always is so far in the rearview mirror because I'm so focused on what I'm doing now. So it will be very nice to start the process over again at least and be planning a new book and not having to feel like, oh, people don't know what I'm working on because it won't be published for a while. Or, I mean, they won't know, but I won't expect them to know because it won't have been written yet. That didn't make much sense. Trust me, it should have. And in another universe, on another branch of the quantum metaversal timeline, it did make sense. And a bunch of people went, wow, that's deep. It just didn't work out on this particular branch. Anyway, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking tonight because there's not really that much to talk about on our end here at the Beale Williams Honor Ranchero. We are just hanging out, doing our thing, working. I'm working. Deb's working. Kids are sort of now starting to crawl out towards the outside world, in both in the temporary sense and in the more permanent sense of, like, finding places to go on with their young adult lives. So that's kind of what's going on around here. Dogs, cat, everybody's fine. Snake, fine. Last I saw, I don't see the snake very often. She's a bit shy. And she tends to hang out in her hide. Those of you who are reptile owners will probably know this word. I didn't know it before. She hangs out in her hide all the time, and she's a very shy snake, or at least so my young people keep reassuring me that that's the reason I never see her. It's entirely possible she ran away, but if so, they continue to tell me, no, she's still in there. She just doesn't come out much. Anyway, which is kind of a weird pet to have, It's like having a best friend who's completely agoraphobic or something, but whatever. It's they're happy. They're happy with the snake. So, and I'm sure in her own way the snake is happy too. Anyway, so let me see who has showed up, and I will say hello, and then we'll start reading a little early tonight. So, Claudia, hello, hello, good to see you. And who else is here? Becca, hello, Becca, pleasure. Jared, greetings to you, Jared. Nice to have you with me. Cliff, hello, hello. Best wishes to you and yours too. Yes, indeed. I hope you and your family are doing well. Herr Unangst. Okay, good to see you, Jerry. Jeremy, you're not terribly awake, and you worked on your taxes. You are a brave and good citizen, and I'm proud of you. Jim, hello, Jim. I'm in caps. I'm in all caps. Tad Williams, and 3 exclamation points. Hello, Jim. Good to see you too. Yes, me and the fam had a pretty darn good week, all things considered. No major complaints, which is, for us, is a very good week because we sure like to complain. James D. Scott, hello. Good to see you. Kelly, good evening. Steve, and this is Steve Gurr. Hello. Hope all is well for you too. It's doing fine on our side. Hello, Kristen. Good to see you. Playing a close game of Wordscapes. Cool. Sounds like a good plan. Barban, I do that all the time, but it's in my own head, and I'm the only one who knows if I win or lose, which is both interesting and very alienated. Anyway, hi, Barban. Good to see you. Chris, hello, hello. Checking in from northern Germany. A pleasure. Wow, it must be like early in the morning there. Sasha, hello. Good to see you. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing your name right. It's Sacha, so I suppose it could be Sacha or some other pronunciation. So I'm just going with Sasha, and you can feel free to correct me. Mark, hello. Good to see you. Yes, it has been a while. I was just thinking about you today, actually, because I bumped across your name on something else of mine and was just thinking, how is Mark? Love to see you sometime soon. We're in the process of still dealing with kind of staying pandemic lockdown because of our daughter, but things are getting better, or seem to be. Fingers crossed. Monica, good evening to you. Tim, hello, hello. And Tad Fanatics. There's a frightening thought how anybody could be fanatical about me. But if you guys are really willing to be true fanatics, like drug-crazed assassins on my behalf, I'll try to think of something that you can do that would be useful. And I mean something good, something appropriate to a group of drug-crazed hashishine Tad Fanatics. Not just like, hey, yeah, wash my car, but I mean, like destroy some criminal sect who have opposed me or something. So, I'll try to let you know, Tim. Rook, hello. Good to see you. I just sent you an email today, actually. Ms. Rook. So I know you're just jogging through as you take your sleep meds, and I know it's also very late for you oftentimes when these things are going on. But lovely to see you. And we'll talk very soon. All right, who else? Becky, yay! Oh, good. I'm glad you made it. Excellent. Linda, hello. Good to see you. Thank you for joining me. And Todd, my old friend Todd, hello. Good to see you. And Sasha says that is correct. Correct pronunciation. Excellent. Tad, it's 4 a.m. Oh, okay. So are you on the staying up side, or because I'm frequently up till 4 in the morning. I am almost never up in the early morning like, oh, I've done my sleep and now I'm getting up. It's pretty much always the other way around. You've Becky says she feels like a fanatic. Well, hey, I'm in favor, as I said, and when I can think of something suitable to galvanize the whole crew of you into proper fanaticism, and who knows, maybe world domination. That's my only problem as a supervillain. I would make a really lousy supervillain because all I would want to do is have world domination and then just give it back because I don't like the administrative part. I mean, there's no point in conquering the world and from your volcano lair with your dolphins with the frickin' lasers on their heads. And then, like, somebody goes, okay, you got it. You're the master. You're in charge now, Dr. Evil, or, Mr. Malevolence, or whatever your name is, or Dr. Tad. And then you have to go like, oh, wait, I have to do something with it now? I have to keep it going? You mean I have to be the government? Lord, that sucks. So anyway, but I'll try to think of something more small time that we can start with, like, I don't know, picketing a drugstore or something because they refuse to stock chewable vitamins. I don't know, but we'll start small, but then eventually some kind of conquest. I'll figure it out. Anyway, hello. Good to see you all. Thank you for joining me. And now I'm going to read. And as I think we were last night, I believe what was going on, yes, is that Rini and Kabu were testing out the so-called V-tanks in this huge abandoned military base in South Africa's Drakensberg Mountains. The V-tanks are these large, kind of sarcophagus-looking things with a special kind of electro-dynamized gel in them that responds to body movements, but also because of little things that can be done to the gel, they can also simulate things like gravity and movement and physical force and all kinds of things like that. So they're testing these out, and that's where we are. So I'm just going to start with that, and then we will figure out as we go. So I'm going to read the last paragraph of what I read last night, and then just continue. There was a click and then a quiet hum. For a brief instant, the overhead lights flickered. Rini leaned forward to stare into the tank. What appeared to be hard, translucent plastic filling 3/4 of the tank turned foggily opaque. A few moments later, the substance went clear again, but now seemed to be a liquid. Tiny ripples appeared at its surface, thousands of them in concentric whorls like fingerprints. But before she could make out the larger pattern, the ripple subsided. "How are the readings?" she asked. Jeremiah opened a series of windows on the wall screen. "Everything is right where you wanted it." He sounded nervous. "Okay, here we go." Now that the moment had come, Rini was suddenly apprehensive, as though poised at the end of a high diving board. She pulled her shirt over her head and stood for a moment in bra and knickers, looking down from the edge of the tank. Despite the warmth of the room, she felt her skin go pebbly. "It's just an interface," she told herself. "Just input-output, like a touchscreen. You let your father and his electricity in the bathtub get to you." Besides, this was going to be a lot easier than when they did it for real. No catheters, no IV lines, and only down for a short time. She pulled the mask over her face, inserting the plugs into her nostrils and positioning the flexible bubble with its built-in microphone over her mouth. Jeremiah had already started the pumps. Except for a faint metallic coldness, the air tasted and felt quite unexceptional. The hair plugs were easy, but it was a little more difficult to get the eyepieces centered properly. When she finally got them locked down, she lowered herself into the tank by touch. The gel had reached stasis, skin temperature and the same density as her body, so that she floated, weightless. She slowly stretched out her arms to make sure she was centered. The edge of the tank was beyond the reach of both hands. She was hanging in the center of nothing, a small, collapsed star. The darkness and silence were absolute. Rini waited in emptiness for Jeremiah to trigger the initial sequence. It seemed a long wait. Light leaped into her eyes. The universe suddenly had depth again, although it was an unmeasurable gray depth. She could feel a subtle pressure shift as the hydraulics tilted the V-tank upright to its working angle of 90 degrees. She settled slightly. She had weight, although not much. The floating sensation was replaced by a gentle sensation of gravity, although the gel could adjust that back to weightlessness or whatever else the simulation might call for. Another figure appeared, hovering before her. It was a bare-bones sim, little more than an international symbol for humanoid. "Kabu, how are you feeling?" "Very strange. It is different from the harness room. I feel much more as though I am in something." "I know what you mean. Let's try it out." She flashed a few hand commands and created a darker gray plane beneath them that stretched to a putative horizon, giving the empty space an up and down. They settled onto the plane and felt it flat and hard beneath their feet. Is that the bottom of the tank?" asked Kabu. "No, it's just the gel hardening where the processors tell it to harden. Here." She summoned up a ball the same color as the ground. It felt quite substantial beneath her fingers. She deliberately softened it to the consistency of rubber. The processors obliged. "Catch!" Kabu reached up and plucked the ball from the air. "And this too is the gel, hardening where we are supposed to feel an object?" "That's right. It may not even make a whole object, but just give us the correct tactile impression on our hands. And when I throw it," he lobbed it underhand back to Rini, "it is analyzing the arc that it should make, then recreating that first in my tank, then in yours?" "Right. Just like what we did in school, except with better equipment. Your tank could be on the other side of the earth, but if I can see you here, the substance in these tanks will make the experience fit." Kabu shook his rudimentary head in appreciation. "I have said it before, Rini, but your science can indeed do wonderful things." She snorted. "It's not really my science. Besides, as we've already seen, it can do some pretty dreadful things, too." They created and arranged a few more objects, checking the calibration of the tactor system and the various effects, temperature, gravity, not available on the Poly's more primitive harness system. Rini found herself wishing she had a more sophisticated simulation to work with, something that would give her a real idea of how the tanks could perform. Still, it had been a good first day. "I think we've done what we needed to," she said. "Anything else you want to try?" "Yes, actually." Kabu, or his featureless sim, turned to face her. "Do not worry. I have something to share with you." He waved several hand commands. The gray universe disappeared, dropping them into blackness. "What are you doing?" she asked, alarmed. "Please, I will show you." Rini held herself still, fighting hard against the urge to thrash around, to demand answers. She did not like letting someone else control things. Just when the wait seemed interminable, a glow began to spread before her. It started as a deep red, then broke into marbled patterns of white and gold and scarlet and a deep velvety purple. Broken by this glaring brilliance, the darkness formed itself into strange shapes. Light and dark swirled and commingled. The light grew steadily brighter in one spot, coalescing at last into a disk so bright she could not look at it directly. The dark areas took on shape and depth as they settled to the bottom of her field of vision, like sand poured into a glass of water. She stood in the middle of a vast, flat landscape painted in harshly brilliant light, broken only by stunted trees and the humps of red rocks. Overhead, the sun smoldered like a white-hot ingot. "It's a desert," she said. "My God! Kabu! Where did this come from?" "I made it." She turned, and her surprise deepened. Kabu stood beside her, recognizably himself. Gone was the impersonal sim from the military lab's operating system, replaced by something very close to her friend's own small, slim form. Even the face, despite a certain smooth stiffness, was his own. Kabu's sim wore what she guessed was the traditional garb of his people, a loincloth made of hide, sandals, and a string of eggshell beads around the neck. A quiver and bow hung from one shoulder, and he held a spear in his hand. "You made this? All of this?" He smiled. "It is not as much as it seems, Rini. Parts of it are borrowed from other modules on the Kalahari Desert. There is much free gear available. I found some academic simulations, ecological models, evolutionary biology projects in the University of Natal databanks. This is my graduate project." His smile widened. "You have not looked at yourself yet." She looked down. Her legs were bare, and she too wore a loincloth. She had more jewelry than Kabu, and a sort of shawl of hide that covered her upper body, tied at the waist with rough twine. Remembering that they were supposed to be testing the V-tanks, she fingered it. The cured skin felt slithery and a little tacky, not unlike the thing it was supposed to be. "That is called a karos." Kabu pointed to the place where the shawl gaped at the back. "The women of my people use it as much more than a garment. Nursing babies are carried there, and also forage discovered during the day." "And this?" She held up the piece of wood clutched in her other hand. "A digging stick." She laughed. "This is astonishing, Kabu. Where did this come from? I mean, how did it get onto this system? You couldn't have done all this since we got here." He shook his head, sim face grave. "I copied it from my storage at the poly." Rini felt a clutch of alarm. "Kabu!" "I had Martine's help. Just to be safe, we shipped it through, what did she call it? An offshore router. And I left you a message." "What are you talking about?" "While I was in the police system, I left a message on your account there. I said that I had been trying to reach you and hope to speak to you soon about my studies and my graduate project." Rini shook her head. She heard tinkling and reached up to touch her dangling earrings. "I don't understand. I thought that if someone was looking for your contacts, it would be good if they thought I did not know where you were. Maybe then they would not persecute my landlady. She was not a pleasant person, but she did not deserve the sort of trouble we have had. But, Rini, I am unhappy." She was finding it hard to keep up. "Why, Kabu?" "Because I realized as I was leaving the message that I was deliberately telling a lie. I have never done that before. I fear that I am changing. It is no surprise that I have lost the song of the sun. Even behind the mask of his simulation, Rini could see the small man's discomfort. This is what I was afraid of. She could think of no comfort to give him. With any other friend, she would have argued the ethics of the useful lie, the self-protecting falsehood. But no other friend would feel a lie as a sort of physical corruption. She could not imagine anyone else in her life despairing because he could not hear the sun's voice. Show me more. It was all she could say. Tell me more about this place. It is only just begun. He reached out and touched her arm as though to thank her for the distraction. It is not enough to make something that looks like the home of my people. It must feel like it as well, and I am not yet skilled enough for that. He began to walk, and Rini fell in beside him. But I have made a small piece, in part to learn the lessons that come from mistakes. Do you see that? He pointed to the horizon. Above the desert pan, just visible beyond a stand of thorny acacias, loomed a cluster of dark shapes. Those are the Sodiro Hills, a very important place for my people, a sacred place, you would call it. But I have made them too easily visible, too stark. She stared. Despite his discontent, there was something compelling about the hills, the only tall things in this wide, flat land. If the real ones were even remotely similar, she could understand the power they must hold over the imaginations of Kabu's people. Rini reached up and stroked her earrings again, then touched the eggshell necklaces at her throat. How about me? Do I look as much like me as you look like yourself? He shook his head. That would have been presumptuous. No, my own sim was concocted from an earlier project at the Poly. I added to it for this, but at the moment I have only 2 other sims, male and female. They are made to look like a man and woman of my people. His smile was sad and a little bitter. In this place, anyway, I shall make sure no one comes onto Bushman land but Bushmen. He led her down a sandy slope, deeper into the pan. Flies hummed lazily. The sun was so fierce that Rini found herself longing for a drink of water, despite the fact that they had surely been in the tanks less than half an hour. She almost wished they had hooked up the hydration system despite her dislike of needles. Here, said Kabu. He squatted on his heels and began to dig with the butt of his spear. Help me. What are we looking for? He did not answer, but concentrated on digging. The work was hard, and the heat of the sun made it even more tiring. For a moment, Rini completely forgot that they were in a simulation. There. Kabu leaned forward. Using his fingers, he unearthed something that looked like a small watermelon from the bottom of the hole. He lifted it triumphantly. This is a tsama. These melons keep my people alive in the bush during the season of drought, when the springs have no more water. He took his knife and cut the melon's top off, then took the butt of his spear, wiped it clean of dirt, and pushed it into the melon. He worked it like a pestle until the fruit's contents were a liquefied pulp. Now you drink it, he said, smiling. But I can't drink, or at least I can't taste anything. He nodded. But when my simulation is complete, you will have to drink, whether you can taste it or not. No one can live like my people if they do not struggle to find water and food in this harsh land. Rini took the tsama rind and upended it over her mouth. There was a curious absence of sensation around her face, but she could feel little splatters of wetness down her neck and belly. Kabu took it from her, said something she could not understand, full of clicks and trills, and drank from the melon himself. "Come," he said. "There are other things I wish to show you." She stood troubled. "This is wonderful, but Jeremiah and my father will be worried about us if we are on too long. I didn't tell him how to monitor our conversation, and I doubt he'd be able to figure it out on his own. They might even try to pull us out. Knowing I would show you this place, I told them we might be longer than you had planned." Kabu looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "But you are right. I am being selfish." "No, no, you're not. This is wonderful." She meant it. Even if he had cobbled it together from other modules, he had an incredible flair for virtual engineering. She could only pray that his association with her ended happily. After seeing even this small piece, she thought it would be a crime if his dream went unfulfilled. "It's truly wonderful. I hope to spend a lot more hours here someday soon, Kabu." "Do we have time for something else? It is important to me." "Of course." "Then come with me a little way farther." He led her forward. Although they walked what seemed to be only a few hundred yards, the hills were suddenly much closer, looming overhead like stern parents. In their shadow stood a small circle of grass shelters. "This is unnatural to move so fast, but I know our time is short." Kabu took her wrist and drew her to an empty stretch of sandy soil before one of the shelters. A pile of small sticks was already laid out there. "I must also do one more unnatural thing." He gestured. The sun began to move swiftly. In moments it had completely disappeared behind the hills, and the sky had darkened to violet. "Now I will build a fire." Kabu took 2 sticks from his pouch. "Male stick, female stick," he said with a smile. "That is what we say." He placed one into an indentation in the other, then held the second to the ground with his feet while he rapidly spun the first between his palms. From time to time he plucked bits of dry grass from his pouch and pushed them into the indentation. Within moments, the grass was smoking. The stars had burst into view in the night sky overhead, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. Rini shivered. She hoped her friend would get the fire going soon, even if that meant stretching accuracy a little. As Kabu transferred the smoldering grass to the pile of sticks, she leaned back, looking at the sky. It was so wide, wider and deeper than it ever seemed over Durban. And the stars seemed so close. She almost felt she could reach up and touch them. The fire was surprisingly small, but she could feel its warmth. However, Kabu did not give her much chance to enjoy it. He took 2 strings of what appeared to be dried cocoons from his pouch and tied one around each of his ankles. When he shook them, they made a soft, buzzing rattle. "Come." He rose and beckoned. "Now we will dance." "Dance?" "Do you see the moon?" He pointed. It floated in the blackness like a pearl in a pool of oil. "And the ring around it. Those are the marks that the spirits make when they dance around it, for they feel it to be a fire. A fire just like this." He reached out and took her hand. Although a part of her could not forget that they were in separate tanks, yards apart, she also felt his familiar presence. However physics might define it, he was definitely holding her hand, leading her into a strange, hopping dance. "I don't know anything about—" "It is a healing dance. It is important. We have a journey ahead of us, and we have suffered much pain already. Just do as I do." She did her best to follow his lead. At first she found it difficult, but then, when she stopped trying to think about it, She began to feel the rhythm. After a while, she felt nothing but the rhythm. Shake, step, shake, shake, step, head back, arms up. And always there was the quiet whisper of Kabu's rattles and the soft slap of their feet on the sand. They danced on beneath the ringed moon before the hills that bulked black against the stars. For a while, Rini quite forgot everything else. She pulled off her mask before she was all the way out of the gel, and for a moment found herself choking. Her father's hands were under her arms, and he was pulling her out of the tank. "No," she said, fighting for breath. "Not yet." She cleared her throat. "I have to scrape the rest of this stuff off me and put it back in the tank. It's hard to replace, so there's no point dripping it all over the floor." "You are down a long time," her father said angrily. "We thought the two of you gone brain dead or something. That man said not to bring you up, that your friend said it's okay." I'm sorry, Papa." She looked over to Kabu, who was seated on the edge of his own tank, scraping gel. Rini smiled at him. "It was amazing. You should see what Kabu's made. How long were we under?" "Almost 2 hours," said Jeremiah disapprovingly. 2 hours? My God!" Rini was shocked. We must have spent at least an hour of that dancing," she thought. "I'm so sorry. You must have been worried to death." Jeremiah made a disgusted face. "We could see that your breathing and heart and whatnot were all normal. But we were waiting for you to come back and join us because that French woman's been wanting to talk to you. Important message, she said." "What? What did Martine want? You should have brought us back out." "We never know what you expect," said her father, scowling. "All this craziness. How someone's supposed to know when he's going to get shouted at. What he's supposed to do." All right. I said I was sorry. What was the message?" "She say call her when you come out." Rini wrapped a military-issue bathrobe around her still sticky form, then called Martine's exchange number. The mystery woman was on the line within moments. "I am so glad you have called. Was the experiment a successful one?" "Excellent, but I can tell you about that later. They said you had an urgent message." "Yes, from Monsieur Singh. He said to tell you that he thinks he may have found a way to beat the Otherland security. But he also said levels of use have gone up dramatically in the past few days. The network is very busy, which may mean something important is about to happen. Perhaps that was the meaning of the hourglass, the calendar. The 10 days are almost up. In any case, we dare not wait for another opportunity." Rini's heart sped. Which means that Singh will go in tomorrow. What he cannot do by planning, he will trust to luck, he said. And if you are joining us, you will have to do it then. There may not be another chance. Chapter 30. In the Emperor's Gardens. Netfeed News. Malaysian rebels warn West to stay away. Visual. Jungle fighting in North Borneo. Rocket casualties. Voiceover. The Malaysian rebel group, which calls itself Swords of New Malacca, warned Western tourists and business travelers that they are entering a war zone. The rebels, who have waged a 6-year war against the Malaysian federal government to overturn Malaysia's secular and pro-Western policies, killed 3 Portuguese diplomats in an attack last week, and says that they will now treat all Westerners in Malaysia, including Australians and New Zealanders, as enemy spies. Visual. Rang Hussein Kawat, new Malaccan rebel spokesman. Hussein Kawat. Europe and America have enforced a regime of hooliganism on the rest of the world for 500 years. But their day is ending in blood if necessary. Our own blood may flow, but it will no longer be poisoned by Western credits, Western ideas. The corruption of the federal government infidels in Kuala Lumpur is a stink in the nostrils of heaven. Hurley Brumman stood at the helm of the airboat, wheel clenched in one hand, his stern, bearded profile silhouetted by the light of Olamar's 2 moons. "We'll tweak their noses, Jonas," he bellowed over the roar of the wind. "The green-skinned priests will learn they can't go fiddling about with an Earthman's fiancée." Paul wanted to ask a question, but he didn't have the heart to shout. Brumman had returned to his figurehead pose, staring down on the lantern-lit towers of Tuktubim. Paul had wanted to find the winged woman again, but he was not entirely sure that this was the way he wanted to go about it. "Hurley's got his blood up now," said Professor Bagwalter. "It really won't do any good to fret. But never fear. He's as mad as a March hare, but if anyone can get the job done, he can." The airboat abruptly lurched downward, making the ship's brass fittings rattle. Paul put out a hand to steady himself, then reached to make sure Galley had not been knocked over. The boy was wide-eyed, but seemed more excited than frightened. The airboat's angle of descent steepened. With the ship plunging downward at such an angle that it was all Paul could do simply to hold on to the railing, Hurley Brumman left his position at the helm, dragging himself forward hand over hand along the railing, then tugged at a great metal handle on the back of the ship's cabin. All the ship's lanterns, on the bow, on the sailcloth wings, and along the hull, suddenly went dark. The airboat continued to plummet. A tower top suddenly leaped up on one side of the ship and flashed upward past them. Another daggered up just beyond the rail on Paul's side, so close he felt he could touch it. A third sprouted beside the first. Terrified, Paul looked through the carved railing. The ship was hurtling down toward an entire forest of needle-sharp minarets. "My God!" Paul jerked Galley toward him, although he knew there was nothing he could do to protect the boy. "We're going to—" The ship suddenly bottomed out, throwing Paul and the others to the deck. A moment later, it shuddered to a halt in midair, hovering in the midst of a thicket of pointed roofs. Brumman had scrambled back to the helm. "Sorry about the bump," he brayed. "Had to snuff the lanterns, though. We're going to surprise them." As Paul helped Galley to his feet, Brumman was tipping a furled rope ladder over the railing. As it rustled down into darkness, he straightened with a satisfied smile on his face. "Perfect! We're right over the Imperial Gardens, just as I thought. They'll never expect us to go that way. We'll be in and out with your fair lady in the blink of an eye, Jonas, old man." Professor Bagwalter was still kneeling on the deck, searching for his glasses. I say, Hurley, that was a bit uncalled for, wasn't it? I mean, couldn't we have made a bit more leisurely approach?" Brumman shook his head with obvious fondness. "Bags, you old stick in the mud. You know my motto. Move like the wind, strike like lightning. We aren't going to give these ghastly priest chappies a chance to spirit our quarry away. Now let's get cracking, Jonas. You'll come, of course. Bags, I know you're anxious for a little action, but perhaps you should stay here with the ship. Be ready to take off. Besides, someone ought to keep an eye on the young lad." "I want to go." Galley's eyes were bright. "No, against my rules." Brumman shook his head. "What do you say, Bags? I know it's hard cheese on you, but just this once, perhaps you should give the adventure side a miss." The professor did not seem unduly put out. In fact, Paul thought, he seemed grateful for the exercise. "If you think it best, Hurley. That's settled, then. Let me just strap on old Betsy here." Brumman opened the lid of a trunk beside the steering wheel and removed a sheathed cavalry saber, which he belted around his hips. He turned to Paul. How about you, old man? Weapon of choice? I might have put a pistol or two in here, but you'll have to promise not to spark one off until I give the word. Brumman pulled out a pair of what to Paul seemed vaguely archaic sidearms, and peered down their barrels. Good, both loaded. He passed them over to Paul, who shoved them in his belt. After all, we don't want to let the priest know we're on our way any earlier than we have to. Brumman continued to dig in the chest. So we'll need something to start with, too. Ah, just the ticket. He straightened up, holding an outlandishly ornate weapon that seemed part axe, part spear, and which stood 2/3 of Paul's height. Here you go. It's a Vonari saddlejack. Surprisingly good for close-up work, and rather appropriate since your fiancé is one of them. Vonari, I mean. As Paul stared at the strange filigreed weapon, Brumman trotted to the railing and swung his leg over. Come on, old man, time to go. Feeling almost helpless, as though he moved through someone else's dream, Paul followed him over the railing. Be careful, said Gally, but Paul thought the boy looked like he was enjoying the prospect of violent danger more than he ought to be. Do try to keep Hurley from creating an interplanetary incident, added Bagwalter. Paul found it difficult to climb with the saddlejack in one hand. 100 feet below the ship, and still half that distance from the ground, Brumman stopped and waited impatiently for him. I say, old chap, you'd think it was someone else's sweetheart entirely that we were on our way to rescue. We're going to lose the element of surprise. I'm not really used to this sort of thing. Paul swayed, his free hands sweaty against the ladder's rungs. Here! Brumman reached up and took the saddlejack from him, then resumed his descent. Paul now found it easier to climb and could even look around for the first time. They were surrounded still, but by oddly shaped trees rather than towers. The garden seemed to stretch a great distance in all directions. The warm Martian night was full of the scent of growing things. There was something about the thick greenery and the silence that tickled his memory. Plants. He struggled to remember. It seemed somehow important. A forest surrounded by walls. Brumman had stopped again, this time at the bottom of the ladder, a short jump from the ground. Paul slowed. Whatever memory the Imperial Gardens had called to now slid out of reach once more, replaced by a more recent concern. You said that they would never expect us to come in this way, but I saw lots of airships tonight. Why will this surprise them? His companion slid his saber out of its sheath, then vaulted lightly to the ground. Huge, flesh-colored blossoms swayed in a breeze Paul could not feel. Some of the trees had thorns as long as a man's arm, and others bore flowers that looked like wet, hungry mouths. Paul shuddered and jumped down. Because of the Vormogs, actually, Brumman said in a confidential whisper. He tossed over the saddlejack. Most people are scared to death of the things. He set off at a swift pace. Paul hurried after him. Vormogs? What are those? Martian beasties. Snake apes, some people call them. Ugly bastards. Paul had only a half-second to absorb this concept before something huge, shaggy, and stinking dropped from a tree into the middle of the path. Speak of the devil, said Brumman, and swiped at the thing with his saber. Even as the creature snarled and shied back, Paul had a glimpse of slotted yellow eyes and a wide snout full of curving fangs. 2 more shapes dropped from a tree beside them. Paul only just managed to get the Vonari axe up in time to ward off a long-taloned paw lashing toward his face. Even so, the blow loosened his grip on the weapon and nearly knocked him over. Don't drive them toward the palace, called Brumman. He had engaged 2 of the beasts simultaneously, and his saber was an almost invisible blur in the moonlight. Keep them here in the dark part of the garden. If Paul could have managed to drive them anywhere, he would have done so happily, but he was hard-pressed just to stay alive. The hairy thing in front of him seemed to have arms as long as buggy whips. Just blocking them as they slapped at his face and belly consumed every part of his strength and speed. He thought of the pistols, but realized he could not possibly draw one before the thing would be on him, with its venom-dripping fangs at his neck. Even Drummond was finding it difficult to talk now. From the corner of his eye, Paul saw something stagger back. For a terrifying moment, he thought it was his companion, but then he heard the other man's quiet chuckle of pleasure as one of the beasts fell and did not rise. Still, the second of the Vormargs seemed quite capable of occupying Drummond until its comrade had finished with Paul. Paul took a step backward and almost stumbled over an exposed tree root. As he regained his balance, his enemy leaped toward him. In desperation, he flung the saljak in the snake ape's face. The weapon was not balanced for throwing. The weapon was not balanced for throwing. It turned in midair, striking the creature heavily and knocking it off balance, but doing little damage. During the moment's lull, Paul tugged one of the pistols from his belt, pushed it as close to the Vormarg's face as he could reach, and pulled the trigger. The hammer fell. For a hideously long split second, nothing happened. And then the gun jerked and made a noise like a thunderclap as fire vomited from the end of the barrel. The snake ape sat down. Nothing left atop its shoulders but blood, tatters of burnt flesh, and fur. "For heaven's sakes, old chap, what are you doing?" Drummond was clearly irritated. He had braced his boot against the chest of the second Vormarg he had killed so he could pull his saber out of its belly. "I told you not to touch that off until I said to." Paul was too busy struggling for breath to argue. "Well, if there are any more of these lovelies around, that'll bring 'em down on us like flies on a honey wagon. Not to mention that you've doubtless woken up the Sumbar's onyx guard. We'd better leg it toward the Imperial residence and make the best of a bad business. I must say I'm disappointed in you, Jonas." Drummond wiped his saber on a leaf the size of a tea tray, then sheathed it with one thrust. "Come along." He turned and trotted away through the vegetation. Paul picked up the saljak and stumbled after him. He tucked the pistol he had fired into his belt and pulled out the other one, just to be prepared. It was impossible to guess what ghastly death trap this idiot might lead him into next. Drummond sprinted through the tangle of the Imperial Gardens as though he had been doing it all his life, with Paul pounding along doggedly behind. Within moments, they reached a stone wall that rose dozens of feet, featureless but for a single window more than a man's height above the ground. Drummond vaulted up and caught at the sill, then pulled himself up. He reached down a hand and dragged Paul after him. The room before them was empty, but for a group of stone urns stacked in one corner, and was lit only by a candle guttering in an alcove. Drummond dropped down from the window and moved on noiseless feet toward the far door, listened there for a moment, then led them into the brighter torch-lit hallway outside. The hall was also unoccupied, but sounds coming from one direction, harsh voices and the rattle of armor, suggested it would not be that way for long. Drummond snatched one of the row of torches from its sconce and touched it to the hem of a tapestry that filled the middle reaches of the wall as far in both directions as Paul could see, an endless and incomprehensible record of animal-headed people at work and play. Flames ran along the tapestry's bottom edge and began to climb upward. "Come on, man!" Drummond grabbed Paul's arm and dragged him away. "That's to slow the onyx guard down a jot. A quick sprint and we'll be in the temple precinct." Bits of burning tapestry had already fallen to the floor, where the carpet was beginning to smolder. Other flames were already pawing at the heavy wooden ceiling beams. The hallway was beginning to fill with smoke. Taltors appeared in some of the doorways as Paul followed Hurley Drummond down the long hallway. Most appeared to have been sleeping. It was clearly hard to tell an earthling complexion from the greenish skin of the Ulamari by torchlight. Several of the palace residents shouted excited questions at them, thinking, more rightly than they knew, that these hurrying men might be privy to the nature of the emergency. Not all were so passive. One huge Taltor soldier, whose black livery suggested he must be part of the Onyx Guard Drummond had mentioned, stepped out of a crossing corridor to bar their path. Paul's companion, showing a slightly surprising degree of restraint, merely dealt him a swift uppercut to the jaw. Paul, a few paces behind, was forced to vault over the collapsed guardsman. This is all like something out of an old film, he thought, some Arabian Nights melodrama. And for an instant that thought opened a whole vista of memory in his head, of countless things and names and ideas, as though someone had swung wide the doors of a great library. Then he slipped on the polished floor and nearly went headfirst onto the stone tiles. By the time he had regained his balance and was hurrying after Drummond again, the mental fog had returned. But he knew now that there was something behind it, that this murkiness was not his natural state. He felt a surge of hope. Drummond skidded to a stop before a tall archway sealed by a heavy door. "This is it," he said. The noises of pursuit and the sounds of confused palace residents had merged into a single rising din behind them. "Don't believe everything you see in here, and don't lose your head. Also, don't kill anyone. The Soombar's priesthood has a deuced long memory." Without waiting for a reply, he slammed his shoulder against the door. Excuse me. He slammed his shoulder against the door. It rattled in its sockets, but did not open. Drummond took a step back, then kicked at it. The door shivered and fell inward, the bolt broken off on the inside. A few white-robed Martians, who had apparently come to investigate the first assault on the door, were standing just beyond the threshold. Drummond bowled them over like 10-pins. As Paul followed him through, another who had been lurking behind the doorway leapt out. Paul stunned him with the handle of the saljak. "Now you're in the spirit of the thing," Drummond shouted. "Head for the inner sanctum." They pelted down another long corridor lined with huge statues of the same beast-headed beings who had decorated the tapestry, then broke through another doorway, this one little more than a ceremonial screen, and were greeted by a blast of hot, foggy air. They were in a large chamber. An ornamental pool shrouded in steam filled the center of the room. Several more priests, these wearing golden beast masks, looked up in startlement at their sudden entrance. Drummond sprinted around the edge of the pool, pausing only to fling one of the masked priests into the water. The splash set the mists eddying, and for a split second Paul could see clearly to the far side of the room. The winged woman was slumped on a bench, her chin on her chest, her thick dark hair falling forward so that it almost hid her face. But it was her. Paul knew it beyond a doubt. He felt a thrill of horror to see her so seemingly lifeless. All this lunatic adventure had been to rescue her. But was he too late? He sprinted forward. Two hissing priests rose up before him out of the mist, waving long, thin daggers. He lifted the saljak horizontally before him and knocked them backward, stepping on one of them as he hurtled past. Drummond was on the other side of the pool, keeping three more robed assailants at bay with his saber. Paul ducked under a priest's dagger stroke, dealt a backhand blow that sent another sprawling to the tiles, then reached the stone bench in a few steps. He reached out his hand and cupped the woman's face, lifting it. Her pale blue skin was warm, her eyes half open. She had been drugged in some way, but she was alive. He was seized by an intense joy, a feeling as foreign as it was powerful. He had found someone who meant something to him, who perhaps knew something of who he was, where he came from. Oh, for heaven's sake, Jonas, what are you waiting for? Must I keep swapping chops with these greenskins all night? Paul leaned forward to pick her up, but discovered that her hands were manacled to the bench. Brumman was still holding the trio of priests at the end of his sword, but several others had escaped and were running for the door, doubtless to alert the guards. Paul stretched the woman out on the bench, pulling her arms out straight above her head, aimed carefully, and brought the saljack down as hard as he could, sending links flying like popcorn. He lifted her, careful not to crush her fine wings, and threw her over his shoulder. "I've got her!" "Then leg it, man! Leg it!" And that's where we're going to stop, because there's still several pages left of the chapter. I just looked up to see Becky's comment. Wait, did he say flies humped or hummed? Because I swear I heard, now I assure you that was almost certainly flies humming. Although, flies are flies, and, on a Saturday night, who knows what flies are thinking about. Anyway, so I am going to go on with the rest of my evening now, and I strongly recommend that you all prepare to do the same with yours, wherever you may be checking in from. Excuse me, it's been a great pleasure, as always, to spend time with you. I hope you've enjoyed it. And sorry, I'm still reading the column of comments over here on the side. You're funny, Becky. Anyway, so I thank you. I suggest that you take very good care of yourselves, because you are important. And also then you can help take care of your loved ones, your friends, your neighbors, those around you. And as we all do that, then we can all get through these things together, and that will be a good thing. So without further ado, I thank you again. I will be back next Sunday for my 1 a.m. reading, where we will continue with Paul's adventures currently on Mars, or Ulamar, as they say, with Hurley Brummond and the rest. And then, of course, again on Sunday at this slot, 7 p.m. TAD time on this TAD channel. So be good, be well. I will see you very soon. Good night.